Guys, boxing gossip here, Sunday evening. Doing a late video on Canelo versus Liam Smith. Actually, I wasn't able to stay up and watch the fight last night, but watched it during the course of today and wanted to put down a few thoughts on it. First and foremost, credit goes to Liam Smith. Liam Smith has always struck me as a gritty, determined, genuine tough guy, and he showed that in this fight. He showed a lot of heart to stay in the fight. He showed a good bit of grit after he'd been hurt. He got up. He got up and he went back to pushing the pace against Canelo. And he was even waving Canelo on and asking him to come forward. A lot of heart, a lot of determination, and it's a loss that to me won't be detrimental to Liam Smith's career. He was hurt badly to the body in the fight. And even though it's not good to be hurt to the body, obviously, it's better than being knocked unconscious to the head, and possibly sustaining a more serious long-term injury or having more serious long-term effects. But it was a good fight. Canelo, probably a bit shorter than Liam Smith. Liam Smith maybe a bit more of a rangier kind of guy. But if you looked at the two guys' backs in the ring, Canelo looked a weight class or two above him. Canelo's back just looked so thick, and he's got that kind of build like a bull, whereas Liam Smith looked quite sort of stringy, quite rangy in there. But that's a recurring theme with Canelo Alvarez fights, so perhaps that shouldn't really be a surprise. But the fight was entertaining. Both guys came forward. Neither guy really looked to take a backward step, and they both looked to put the pressure on each other. There was a lot of good work inside the pocket, a lot of good hooks, a lot of good uppercuts, a lot of body work from both men. And really what you had is two come-forward fighters looking to be aggressive and looking to meet in the centre of the ring and push the pace. And it was done to a high standard. Liam Smith, high-class pressure fighter as we know. Canelo, sort of the classic boxer-puncher type. And for me, in this fight, Canelo actually had the slight advantage, perhaps more than a slight advantage, a substantial advantage in boxing capability. Canelo's jab was on point. Some of the combinations he was putting together were really, really good. Specifically, some of the shots he was landing to the body. The punches he landed to Smith's body to drop Smith and eventually to stop Smith were literally textbook. Real textbook punches from Canelo. And whilst Canelo isn't a one-punch knockout artist, he seems to be such a heavy-handed guy who brings a lot of pressure and a lot of pace to a fight. And I think that's why we often see him stop opponents in the middle to late rounds. And that's what we saw today with Liam Smith. In the early rounds, I wasn't saying that Liam Smith was being hurt, but you could just see Canelo had so much more zip on his punches. His punches were a lot more weighty. The combinations just appeared to have so much more snap on them. And it wasn't a surprise that the bigger man with the bigger punch was able to start hurting Liam Smith towards the middle to the end rounds. I was really, really pleased with Canelo's stamina in the fight as well. There was a lot of talk about him making 154 and having to be very tight at the weight to do that. With this being a high output fight, there was perhaps a concern that Canelo would fade, but he didn't fade, certainly to my eye. He kept the pressure and he was really educated in there. His punch selection was fantastic. I thought he was exceptionally patient in the ring. I know he's a young guy, but Canelo's a veteran. He's already got 45 or so fights, and when he hurt Smith, he didn't rush him. He didn't abandon his defences. He sort of was patient, waited for another gap and exploited it, and he did so really, really well. I was actually very impressed with Canelo. He's an improving fighter, and the more I see of Canelo, the more I like of him. I really do. Defensively, I thought Canelo was fairly sound in the fight as well. Sure, Liam Smith landed some shots on him and did some good work at times, but Canelo, for me, really did a good job of staying out of trouble in the fight. And I would say it was a well-rounded performance from Canelo. I'd say he outboxed Liam Smith, he out-jabbed Liam Smith, he had more power than Liam Smith, he had better defensive work than Liam Smith. Genuinely, I was really, really impressed by Canelo. And I know Liam Smith is an unproven fighter at this sort of level. Fundamentally, his best win was probably John Thompson, wasn't it? But Liam Smith, to my eye, has always been a fighter with a decent upside, and a fighter who maybe was sub-elite level, but certainly a class fighter. And Canelo really dominated this fight from start to finish as far as I'm concerned. And ended the fight with devastating fashion. As for Liam Smith, as I've said, he showed a lot of heart in there. I also thought in the early rounds Smith was quite tight defensively. I thought Liam Smith did a good job actually of trying to stay out of trouble and trying to keep himself covered up against some of the early attacks from Canelo Alvarez. So I was impressed with that. I think one of the things that shone through in this fight for me is, Canelo Alvarez for me is a versatile fighter. He's someone who brings a lot of tools to the party, if you like. But Liam Smith, for me, possibly lacks that versatility at the same elite level. We know he's come forward, we know he's pressure, we know he's high output. But was he able to move on the back foot throwing a jab? No. Was he able to show the same body of work of Canelo Alvarez? Probably no. And for me, the gap in levels was related to that. Also related to the size. There were different size guys in there, different levels, different attributes, and Canelo for me looked really, really good. I know Canelo gets a lot of stick over the Golovkin fight, but fundamentally, if the guy can make 154 as he's done in this fight, then he is still a 154 fighter. That's the rules of boxing, and it's as simple as that. And if we consider the fact how young Canelo is, he's building a fairly impressive resume of names of people that he's been in the ring with at such a young age. Certainly, his resume in terms of the names he's been in the ring with is far superior to Golovkin's. Not that that would necessarily input how it would go if they did fight. A lot of people are saying, will Canelo now beat Golovkin? And certainly Golovkin's not getting any younger. Let's have it right. I think Golovkin's 34, something like that. So if the fight happens in 2 or 3 years' time, maybe Canelo would beat him. But let's put it this way, the Canelo who fought Liam Smith last night may well beat the Golovkin who fought Kell Brook. That reckless Golovkin who abandoned his defences and was a bit hit and miss and a bit wild and a bit swingy. But Golovkin, for me, is a fighter who, like Canelo, is more versatile than Liam Smith. And we've seen Golovkin adapt his game and be far more respectful of fighters and far more defensively minded of fighters in there when he's got some more respect for their power than he did for Kell Brook. So I suspect if Golovkin were to fight Canelo, fight would break down differently. And I suspect that Golovkin would be more inclined to move and use the jab, which has possibly found Canelo out in the past once or twice when Canelo sort of struggled with that moving back foot fighter. So if I was to make a decision with a gun to my head in that fight, I'd still be picking Golovkin, and I believe that the Golovkin who fought Kell Brook wouldn't show up whatsoever. I believe it would be more like the Golovkin who fought Lemieux or Curtis Stevens perhaps. But Canelo Alvarez is a force to be reckoned with. He's definitely a pound for pound top 10 fighter as far as I'm concerned. And I actually think that despite some of the people being upset with him about Triple G and about the catchweights, and I think there's an incorrect assumption that Canelo Alvarez is a brawler. He's a scrapper. And when I look at Canelo, and especially his recent fights with Smith and Cotto and the like, I really see a guy who's improving. I see a guy who's got great experience under his belt, and is learning and is adapting. And I was really impressed by how he took care of business. I think that Canelo, the way he fought last night, the way he put punches together, and the way he selected the right punch at the right time and managed to keep his defences tight himself, I think he's a force to be reckoned with. Now, 154 is a weird division because you've got guys like Andrade, Charlo, those sort of guys who may actually be the type of style that is perfect to beat Canelo. Those sort of slick, back foot type boxer types. But taking those sort of guys aside, if he is stepping back up to 160, which is what he's suggesting he's going to do, I really do think he's a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I've said Golovkin I'd pick to beat him, most likely. But right about now, I'd certainly have Canelo over Billy Joe Saunders. I'd have Canelo over Chris Eubank Jr. I'd have Canelo over Danny Jacobs. I think he is a very, very elite fighter. And I think the levels were very, very obvious in the fight last night. I hope Liam Smith comes back. I hope he pushes again for world title level. I don't want to see him stepping down. I personally think he's above domestic fights with like the Liam Williams and Gary Corcorans of this world. I'd like to see him try and get back in the mix on the world scene. He's a likeable fighter, and his style will cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. I just think that his style wasn't the right style to beat Canelo, and He came up against a guy like Canelo who could do exactly what he could do in the ring, but not only do it better, do it bigger, do it faster, but do it with more versatility as well. So that's my thoughts on the fight. I enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Were you impressed with Liam Smith? Were you impressed with Canelo Alvarez? Where do both guys go from here? If you've enjoyed this, hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, do take the time to subscribe, and certainly my thanks for tuning in.